our Coercion series, part 2. So why does coercive control happen in relationships, or at work, or wherever? So partners like the feeling of power it gives them. Partners may tell themselves they're acting out of pure love. There's also gender role stereotypes, if we're specifically talking men against women, and the way we raise our children. Children are raised by gender. Girls learn to be caretakers at a young age. We clean, we're taught to cook, be feminine. Men are raised not to show feelings except for anger. They're not taught necessarily to be nurturing, or to fight, be competitive. And there's this language that we use about boys will be boys. And when we teach women not to say no and men to be aggressive, it can create problems. We're not teaching men to respect boundaries, and we're not teaching women to enforce boundaries. And this term, particularly with masculinity, is called toxic masculinity. And we all bring these stereotypes into our relationships and in our sexual lives. And not everybody fits in these boxes of stereotypes. Lots of men do show emotion. Lots of women are not necessarily caretakers and maybe don't like to clean or cook. But those are just the stereotypes of what we see in the media and how we raise children. So 3 factors can contribute to a man using coercive control: the dominating tendencies he has, that he does not respect his partner as a separate human being, and he gives himself permission to act in a controlling or abusive way with his partner. Society reinforces men for behaviors and ideas that can contribute to coercive control. And that can also be seen in a variety of ways of our society, that somehow men have control of our reproductive rights. There was laws that men could be women, their wives, up until the 60s, as long as it wasn't thicker than their thumb. So there's a lot of long-held beliefs about men and their control over women and their bodies. Some boys whose fathers punish them harshly grow up to punish their own partners and children in similar ways. They find justification to punish partners. Again, media plays a role. Pornography plays a role in how we experience sexuality and what we think healthy sexuality looks like. Even though pornography isn't usually focused on women's pleasure, it's often focused on man's pleasure, and some pornography can be very, very violent and show control. However, I do want to say that abuse is always a choice. Even though people have experienced trauma or witnessed violence or seen the media, abuse is an active choice that people make, and it's not acceptable. I've experienced trauma and I don't abuse people. I'm not violent. It's not something inherited. People that experience the same abuse in the same household, both can turn out differently. Men also control most of the top positions in finance, politics, entertainment, sports, science, education, and this enables men to retain privilege over women. They have higher wages, they have more financial privilege, they have more access to property. Their bodies are generally physically larger and stronger than us. Also, the use of alcohol and drugs and mental illness can contribute to coercive control. People may use it to control others to hide feelings of feeling not good enough, or anxiety and feeling insecure. They may have anxious attachments and live in fear of being abandoned by people who are most important to them. So if we control them, then maybe they won't leave, even though that's not the way to have relationships. A history of trauma that may have kept them safe, but as adults, it's not healthy coping mechanisms. But I do just want to say abusers need to take responsibility for their actions and stop giving them permission to hurt others. It's not okay. Now, we never ask, why do abusers stay in relationships that are unhealthy or coercive? So they rely on their partners. They're dependent on them to look after them physically and emotionally. They feel secure. They feel vulnerable and anger. And they may be frightened. They fear failure of their relationship. And may impact their reputation and self-image. They may have distorted ideas of what love is. They may not know how to be in relationships without control. And sometimes people may get pleasure out of hurting someone else. And why women stay and get involved with somebody who is using coercive control, or men as well, or any individual. Women in particular may be caught in the web of abuse, or men, before realizing it. And once they're involved, it can be hard to get out. The person who is using the control tactics will do their best to keep them entangled in their control. Certain characteristics may make someone more vulnerable. Their health or physical problems, emotional or intellectual disabilities. They may have family or cultural ideas that fit in with coercive control. They may lack housing, immigration status, or resources. Women or people who've experienced previous abuse in other relationships, or were survivors of child sexual abuse, poverty, financial fears. If they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, they may not be able to think clearly. However, we're not blaming the victim. They did nothing wrong. It's not their fault. We're not defective if we, in relationships of coercive control, anyone can experience this. It's not just limited to certain people. Women with less resources just have a harder time getting out and leaving, or maybe just anybody in general with less resources has a harder time leaving their relationship. And relationships don't start coercive in the beginning. They feel loving, supportive. You feel feelings of love, romance, optimism. May produce a range of feelings as a relationship goes on: fear, love, shame, dependence. And they sprinkle in romance in with the cruelty and control. It's actually cyclical, which keeps you staying because it keeps you compliant. So there's a honeymoon phase where there's nothing has happened. It's really good. And then it goes to the building tension. You can feel something is going to happen, and then there's the outburst or the violence, and then it goes back to the honeymoon phase. And those phases can be shorter, longer. It really depends. The kinder periods are ploys to make people stay, and you can develop trauma bonds to people similar to a bond between a hostage and a victim. You may lose your confidence and self-esteem, and then people stay silent because of shame. It's really hard to talk about being abused. People don't know where to start, and they may not recognize it, and that's why I'm doing this video. The abuser can be really charming and well-liked in the community, and people may not believe it. Maybe you think that you can try to change your partner. Again, you can be trapped by circumstances, financial reasons, childcare, social pressures to not to divorce or leave your partner, cultural, religious ideas, homelessness. Again, there's a risk of feeling like the violence will increase when you leave, or you try to leave and they tracked you down. Women who are experiencing sexual violence or domestic violence, it can take up to 7 times to leave a relationship before they finally fully leave. Most people experiencing abuse manage their situation, and many try to leave and keep the peace in the relationship. But they may have safety zones where there are places that they can go, or relationship they have that they feel valued and free, or they have hobbies where they can express themselves, and that keeps them feeling safe and to stay in the relationship, and may help them resist the coercive control. But yeah, that's the end of this mini series. Please ask any questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them, or get that book. And yeah, I hope you like it, and I hope it's helpful. Thanks.